Hello everyone, welcome back to the new Python video. In the last video we learned about the classes, objects and the reference variable, and I guess we are clear about it, but still let me rephrase some of them again. What are classes? Classes are like the blueprints. Based on that we create the objects. What are objects? Objects are physical existence of those particular classes. And what are reference variables? Reference variables are the variables that we use to access the particular object. So how to define a class? We write class and then the class name is the way to define a class. Creating an object, we just use the class name and then the brackets to create an object, and then to access it we have to use a reference variable. Here a is the reference variable to access that object. Okay, so in this video let's talk little bit more about the constructor and self. In the last video I already said that constructor is a special method that executes itself whenever we create an object. So here def underscore in double underscore init double underscore is a special method called constructor, which it will call itself as soon as we will create the object. So here for this class let me create an object s is equal to student. I created this object, and let me create one more object. Yes, so I created two objects, but I can create multiple objects for the same class. So that means for a class we can create as many objects as we want, and the same goes for the reference variables. We can create as many reference variables as we want. Okay, so I created the student object. Okay, here, wait. And it is 100. Okay, so I created here two objects. So let me do the diagram on like what happens behind the scenes. So here as soon as we create an object, Python virtual machine allocates some space or memory to that object. So here we created object s is equal to student. So one object got created here, and this is the object that got created after creating this s is equal to student. So once the object is created, we already know that as soon as the object is created, constructor got initialized itself. We don't have to call it, so that's why it's a special method. So as soon as this object is created, it will initialize. So as soon as it will initialize, it will allocate the variables that are inside the constructor to this particular object. So now here I got the name, I got the age, and I got the roll number. So these three variables are created. So what's the value for these variables here as per this example? So what is name? Name is Tim for this particular object. Now name is Tim, the age is 20, and roll number is 100. So you can say this is one of the functionality of the constructor. So as soon as the object is created, so whatever the variables are inside the constructor, it allocates those variables to that particular object. So after seeing this, we can say that the purpose of constructor is to provide variables and to perform the initialization. So you can see in the constructor it's double underscore init double underscore. So the init here means initialization. So it initialized itself as soon as the object is created. Okay, so now the variables are allocated to the object, but I want to access them. So how can I access them? So let me come here. So I created the object s is equal to student. Okay, so I want to get like print student name. So I am doing it outside the class. To access the variables outside the class, there has to be some reference variable that will point out to that. For that we use the reference variable for that particular object that we created. So here let me use like s dot name. I want to print student roll number, and it's going to be s dot roll number. I want to print student age. It's going to be s dot age. Let me run this, and here we can see that it's showing me like student name is Tim, roll number is 100, and age is 20. So to access the variables that we declared within the class, or you can say specifically within the constructor, we have to use the reference variable of the object s. We cannot use self or just the name here. So to point them out, we have to use the reference variable of the object to access them, to get the values of them here. If I created one more object like s1 is equal to student. So if I have to access the values for that particular object that I created, I can use like s1 dot name, s1 dot roll number, and s1 dot age. Let me run it here, and for this again we are getting Tim 120. It is because the way we have set up this example. So this is the way to access the variables outside the class. So if I have to call the method called like call name, how can I use it? To call the method, it's same, like I will use the reference variable of the object s dot call name. I will use this and I will run it, and it will say that like my name is Tim and my roll number is 100. So outside the class we can access the variables using s, the reference variable of the object, but within the class to access them we have to use this self, and we will learn about this self and how to use it within the class in details in the upcoming videos. Okay, so now based on our example, so no matter how many objects we are going to create, for all those objects the name, age and roll number, it's going to be the same. And if we call the method call underscore name, it will also return the same values. But I want to have the different name, age and roll number for my students. So what's the way to do that? So let me copy this again, bring it here so that you can see it. I run it, and here let me create an object student. For this I want a different name, like I want the name Penelope Cruz. How old is she? 45, and roll number is like 1. I want this value. So let me run this and see what happens. Before that, let me just go through some explanation. So here in this when I am creating the student object, I am passing 3 values: name, age and roll number. But here when we see inside the constructor, because it's initialized itself, there is only 1 value, so it will definitely throw us the error. So let us see. So here in the error it says that init takes 1 positional argument but 4 were given, but we just provided 3. Why it's 4? So as we already discussed in the previous video, self is already there, that is coming from the Python virtual machine. So it will come on its own, we don't have to mention it from our own side. So self is already here when we create this object. So self is already here, that's 1, and 3 we are passing, so that makes it 4. So we are passing 4 arguments, but in the init it's only 1 argument, that is self. So it will definitely going to throw us the error. So now what we can do to overcome this error is we can pass 3 arguments here also, like name, age, roll number. So now with this I passed, so now it also has the 4 arguments, and this also has the 4 arguments. So let me run it, and let me run it again. So now we got the no error, but okay, I got the no error, but still let me try to access the name. So now still if I access the name, I am still getting the Tim. Why? Because we are not referencing this Penelope Cruz or the name within the constructor anywhere. So to do that, what we have to do is instead of Tim here, we can do name, age, and here it's roll number. So now whatever values we are going to pass, they will come to the self dot name, age, and roll number values. I run this again. So now let me run the s dot name. After running the s dot name, I got the name Penelope Cruz that I wanted. So what's happening here is, when I let me do it here, I created this and so here what's happening is, as soon as we created this object, memory got allocated and this is the object got created. So after that object is created, what will happen? Constructor will initialize itself. If it's initialized itself, what will it do? It will allocate those variables to the constructor. So now it will allocate name here, age here, and roll number here. So now it has three variables: name, age, and roll number. So what are the values for this name, age, and roll number? So it is coming from the here when the object is created. So now Penelope Cruz is the name here, age is 45, and roll number is 1. So these values are assigned here. So now name is here. So self dot name, what is self dot name? Self dot name is whatever we provided, Penelope Cruz. Penelope Cruz. Age is like 45. Sorry for the bad handwriting. And roll number is 1. So that's what happens behind the scene. So that's how we can create an object or define a class in which we want different values for our object. Okay, so let me create one more object. I created the object s1 is equal to student. Here what I want, Salma Hayek. How old is he? Maybe 40. Roll number is 2. So I created this object now. After running, so I want to access the name for this object. So let me get the name. So here we can see now it's Salma Hayek. So with this, so when I create this object, so here I created this new object. If I created this new object, a new memory got allocated. If this new memory got allocated, again name, age, and roll number are going to be here. So it has the name, age, and roll number. It has again three variables. For those three variables, what are the values? For name, now it's Salma Hayek, age is now 40, roll number is now 2, that is going to this self here. So now name is Salma Hayek, age is 40, and for us roll number is 2. So this way we can create multiple objects with different values that we want. Here in this class, name, age, and roll number that we are using inside the constructor, they are just the placeholders here. The actual values that are coming, they are coming from self.name, self.age, and self.roll number. So here instead of name, age, and roll number, we can have anything. So let me go like X, Y, Z. So instead of name, what I want, it's going to be the X here, Y here, and Z here. Okay, so let me run this. Okay, let's make a movie Desperado. So here I created student and it's Desperado 2002. Okay, I created this. So now there is still no error. So okay, I want to access the name. What I can do, s2 dot name. Here we can see it's Desperado. So the same way we can access the roll number and age. So I just want to say that here the main values that are coming, that we are accessing, is coming from the self.name, age, and self.roll number. It's not coming from the here. These are just the placeholders, and here we can have anything. But because for the better code writing, and so that whoever is using it, they can understand it better, it's better to have them a name that's we are using it. So here it's better if I have this name, age, and roll number, so that there is no confusion among other developers or the engineers who is using this code. Okay, so now let's deep dive little bit more into this self. Let me create a class test def underscore init self pass. So this is the class I created, and let me create the object. After creating the object, so there's a reference variable that I can use to access the variables of the particular object. Here you can see I can use this s to access all the variables that are available within the object that we created. So outside the class, I can use reference variables to access the variables present inside the object to use them, but within the class this reference variable t is not present. So if I have to use those variables within the class, how I'm going to use it? For that, self come into the picture. To use the variables within the class, I use the self. So what I mean is, like, let me create a class test again, and def underscore underscore init self. Here let me print id of self is id of self. Okay, the class is created. Let me create the object t is equal to test print. Let me get the id of this object, id of reference variable. Here it's id of t. So let me run this. After running this, I can see that the id of self is 1600 and id of the reference variable is again 1600. So what I mean is, the self is a reference variable that is always pointing to the current object, and when if it's always pointing to the current object, that means we can use it within the class to access the variables that are present for that particular current object. So this, you can say, one of the functionality of the self. So here some people might be thinking, like, what if I create a new object? So let me create a new object. T1 is equal to test and print id of reference variable T1. Here it is, id of T1. Let me execute this. After executing it, I can see the id of self is 5792 and id of reference variable is again 5792. So with this we can see that now the current object is T1. If the current object is T1, so self is also pointing to that particular current object. So we can say that self is a reference variable that is always pointing to the current object. So whatever is going to be the current object, self is pointing to that particular current object. And within the Python class, to access the current object, we can use the self. What I mean by this second line is, like, suppose here this is the class that I created and there's an object that I created like student. hello 21. So this is the object I created. So after creating the object, got allocated, so S is pointing to this object, so this is the current object, so self is also pointing to this current object, and after constructor execution it will have all those three variables that are within the constructor name. Oh my god, age and roll number. So outside the class I can use S to access these three variables, and within the class they are pointing to the same object. I can use self to access these three variables. So that's what I mean when I say that within the Python class, to access the current object we can use the self. Let's talk about the next point. So let me create a class test, and in which let me create a constructor print I am constructor. Let me create a method def f1 self x, here print method. I created this class, and let me create the object. So after creating the object we can see that like there is no error. So this is the constructor. For constructor the first argument is always the self. So the third point is like this: first argument to constructor is always self. And the method that I created here you can see that I am again using this self. So this method is instance method. So next point is first argument to instance method is always self. Let's not worry about the instance method right now, but I'm just telling you that this is an instance method, and the first argument to instance method is always self. We will dig deep into the instance method later on in the upcoming videos. And the third point is, in the previous examples I told that to access the objects or the methods of a class outside the class we always use the reference variable of the object. So we cannot use the self. So self is always used within the class. We cannot use self outside the class. If we try to use it, it will throw us the error. And inside the constructor we use self to declare the object related variables. So in the previous example here, these are the object related variables. Why they are object related variables? Because for every object they are different. So no matter how many objects I'm going to create, I have to pass those values, and it's on like my choice, like if I want different or not, but generally it's different. For every object they are different, so they are like they are object related variables. And I can use self to describe object related variables within the constructor. And in the previous video we already studied that object related variables are called instance variables. So in a nutshell we can say that we can use self to declare instance variables within the constructor. Instance variables, we will learn more about the instance variables again, not again, like in the future. And inside the instance method we use self to access the values of instance variables. So this is the instance method, and to access the values of instance variable we use self. For this point let's just keep it in mind for now, but we will study about this point in future. And last but not the least is self is not a keyword. a keyword in Python. Instead of self, we can use anything like calf, delf, elf, anything, whatever you prefer. With this, what I mean is, let me use this as an example. So first argument is always going to be the self, but name can be anything. So instead of self, I wanna use like delf, and let me remove these values. And here I want Leonardo 39 1. Okay, let me run this. I created this and I want to create an object as is equal to student. And I want to access as dot name. So first is self, but I don't want self. Let me give it delf. I gave it delf, and here I also have to replace those. Do you think it is going to throw us the error? I guess not, but let's see. So here now, using the delf, I can again getting the same value Leonardo. What I mean is, self is not a keyword here. Instead of self, we can use anything here, but self is the industry standards. That's what everyone uses. But the first argument in it is always going to be the self. Here, so you think that it's delf. Let me create anything like delf is equal to 10. You run this, and if you try to run this, it will say that init got multiple values for argument delf. Why multiple? Because Python virtual machine is already giving it a value, and but from our own side we are also trying to give it a value. It will not work like this. So if I just do like this again, one positional argument, 2 were given. Why 2? 1, delf is already coming here, that's as in self, and 10 I am going from my side, so it will throw us the error. Let me run this, and now it's working fine. So yeah, the first argument is always going to be the self. So I guess that's it for this video. In this video we learned something about self, init, constructor, how constructor behaves, how to create an object with different variables, but we will deep dive into these topics again in the future. I guess let me keep it short. I guess everyone got something new to learn. Hope you guys have a wonderful day. Bye, take care.